All right. Welcome to the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for January 11th, 2024. I will call us to order. It is 10 o'clock in the morning, and I will go ahead and lead us in the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, anything to add to the calendar session
Nothing.
other than Snowmageddon that's supposed to come this weekend?
Hope not.
Just a couple items, just to note what Monday, county offices will be closed in recognition of the holiday. The other thing is that I kind of wanted to talk to the board about, I know Kit's out today, and so this might be a discussion maybe for next week when he's back too, is Carolina and I are working on putting together the department head update schedule and also the work session schedule for the year. And I just kind of wanted to put it out there. In years past, we've had kind of discussions early in the calendar year. If there's any specific topics or items or that the board would like to schedule for a work session, I have, I'm trying to think of a way. It doesn't necessarily have to be a work session, or it could be something specific to a work session to talk about scheduling work sessions, but I know that sounds, but
Have a task force.
I know. But there are a few items that I know that commissioners have mentioned to me over the last several weeks and months of wanting to have some more in-depth discussions. I know transit has a couple items that including fares and some of that discussion. Another item is dog control has been a long-standing. That one probably we're going to want a lot of lead time and maybe not necessarily have the discussion as part of the budget process. I think there will be both a budget discussion around dog control, but I think the board may want to schedule some time to talk about that and then find a time to where the sheriff can also be available to provide some input on that. Another big discussion item that we haven't had is the opioid settlement funds that we've received and we have in the budget. I know there's been a lot of question marks around some of those items. So that's just kind of the short list of items that I could come up with right now off the top of my head, and just kind of put it out there for ideas. But maybe this is something we can share the draft calendar so you can see the dates that we're looking at and what we're looking at for department head updates and what that schedule is going to look like for the calendar year. And just kind of wanted to put it out there for some further discussions.
Okay. Did you say you have a draft right now, or?
I have a draft, but it doesn't have anything. It doesn't include anything about work sessions.
Okay.
And of course, my computer just shut down.
So you have the department update schedule and then.
We do.
Okay. Is that, would we be able to maybe coordinate one of these work sessions with that particular department head? Like, for instance, when the sheriff's supposed to come or.
Correct.
Mhm.
Depending on the timing,
Cynthia.
because with the department heads, we try to spread that out as much as possible. So, so they have sufficient time, and then keeping in mind things like budget week when the budget committee's here, holidays, or some of these other things. So we'll share a draft calendar, and I think it might make a little more sense when you see what we have penciled out for department updates. And so, so if you see a date like the sheriff is given an update and you want to have a work session on dog control that same date, that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we just look at the calendar. I've had a couple of other things on my list. Mac Fire has offered to do fentanyl education with us in the schools. So if we're talking about opioid settlement money, maybe some of these can overlap.
Okay, and then
So-
also what are the restrictions, the parameters? Where can we go with it? I know we had some discussions about what it could be used for. Could it be used, for instance, to or staffing at the sheriff's office, or, I mean,
Yeah.
where can we go with it?
Yeah, because there's going to be a couple, because council will probably need time to look at the settlement agreements and the provisions around that. I would probably,
I mean, there's going to be specific language in there, which I
Right.
can make available to the board on short notice. The bigger question is going to be, how can we sort of, what do we do within those parameters? I know some counties have used it for construction. Washington County is using most of their money to build a facility. Otherwise, it's generally for treatment and remediation of opioid abuse. So I think using it to hire staff generically would probably fall outside the framework, but that's certainly something we can have a little bit more detailed discussion about. But yeah, remediation and treatment of opioid abuse are the general sort of intended use of those funds. The language differs slightly from settlement to settlement, but that's what it's intended for.
Okay.
But maybe that needs to occur fairly soon if we're going to talk about it in budget discussions.
yeah, well, we have appropriation authority already established for a portion of those funds. We've had more come in than what was anticipated. And as part of the budget discussions, I think it's really going to be, as long as the funds are appropriated, fully appropriated, it does take the pressure off somewhat. The budget will just make sure that the funds are available to spend. And then depending on a work session or any decisions that are made by the board on how to spend the funds, that can be done after the fact as long as it's fully appropriated.
So we don't have to appropriate it in a particular department.
No.
We can just, okay,
We
No.
could say it's spendable.
yeah.
Correct,
Okay.
as long as it's fully
Yeah.
appropriated. Now, if there's specific things that we want to make sure that we're showing that because we also have to report on how we're spending it. And so sometimes, much like in the way of ARPA, it's good to obligate or earmark it in the budget. So like, as an example, if the funds are going to be transferred to HHS for treatment programs, I like to show that transfer line within that budget and show the amount that we're moving to HHS. And then Lindsay's able to take that number and budget for it. But we don't have to necessarily, if we're not able to have that discussion and the board hasn't made any final decisions on that prior to budget adoption, you could use, as long as it's appropriated, you can spend it.
Okay. Do we know if there's a timeline on spending that money by?
I'll find out.
It seems like it would be strange to put one on if it's a rolling settlement, but yeah,
I'm not aware of a timeline, but I will confirm.
okay. Anything else for calendar?
Nothing.
Okay. Item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. So if you are in the audience or online and would like to offer public comment, please come forward or raise your virtual hand. Okay, hearing none. We will move on to item E, department updates. There's nothing today, nothing on the work session. Nothing under consent agenda, and item H, old business, nothing under old business. Item I, other business. I1 is consideration of approval of an amended and restated grant agreement between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and the Oregon Health Authority for behavioral health resource network, BHRN, funding not to exceed $3,649,276.98, effective through June 30th of 2025.
And we had some questions with Director Manfred and County Council, and basically this is replacing the original agreement. So it's not just an amendment. It replaces the prior grant agreement.
Correct. It's an amended and restated agreement. It appears that what they're doing is rolling some of the remaining funding from the prior agreement into this new agreement. And they made a few program changes that
Right.
I've had a brief back and forth with HHS. And so, yeah, they're simply restating the previous agreement, and then this new agreement is good for another 2 years.
Okay. Well, I would move approval.
I guess my concern about this is Measure 110 funding. And while the good parts of Measure 110 are the treatment dollars, even though they might be less than what is needed. But some of the language in here, it's kind of concerning to me. It's the language is very pro Measure 110. It talks about how Measure 110 centers on equity based on the knowledge that communities of color and tribal communities are disproportionately harmed by laws that criminalize drug possession. And here we are as commissioners in AOC advocating for recriminalizing hard drug possession. So it feels very awkward to me to sign something like this when we are, when Measure 110 has clearly failed in that regard, and we are now advocating against that.
A couple of things to that point, and I agree. As far as the references to equity and communities of color, I think we're finding this language in everything. For instance, the Rethink the Drink program that OHA has been, which I think it's a wonderful message to get out there for people to think about how much they're drinking and those types of things. However, if you look at their stated program, their program objective is to address the disparity that racial injustices have caused alcoholism. And every person I know who struggled with addiction has been a white person. So I do have some concerns about how we have to put everything into a racial category and make it seem that the only reason anyone struggles with anything is because of the color of their skin. I think we're fighting a behemoth at the state in terms of this type of language. However, in defense of the BURN, or the Behavioral Health Resource Network funding, I think if you look, for instance, at the services that are outlined here, you're expanding substance abuse disorder. You're talking about medication-assisted treatment and the staffing with that. So while I understand what you're saying, you're 100% correct. We're at AOC looking at the whole Measure 110 thing, thinking this has got to be dismantled to the degree that it's got to be, something has to give. So, but here we are again, back at every time we get a contract from OHA, there's language in there that there's every single contract I struggle with because I wouldn't want to sign it, but we know they tell us, you make a pact with the devil, sign it, or you don't get the money. And then we lose the funding for these types of programs. We're pushing back at AOC through the HHS Public Safety and HHS Summit. But to be perfectly honest, he who has the gold makes the rules, and they are coming down with a hammer on not wanting to give up any local control programmatically, which I think is a big mistake. So I don't know the answer to it. It happens every single time we have to approve a contract. Some of the language in this stuff is frankly, it's absurd because everything has that DEI component to it, to where everything is now, we're pulling the race card on every single social ill. And I don't think it is legitimately justifiable.
Yeah, I'm certainly not wanting to stand in the way of treatment funding. And parts of Measure 110 have not been repealed or changed yet. So, we're kind of the calm before the storm, I suppose. But I just want to make sure that it's clear that there's some statements in here that we don't agree with in terms of the criminalization of possession, especially hard drugs, and how that is, the changes have not helped any communities, especially not communities of color or tribal communities. So Not super comfortable with that language. I know it's, we haven't actually changed it yet, but there is language in here about funding expungements. And I guess I hope that the bulk of this funding, the majority of the funding is going to treatment and not funding expungements when in a month or two, we may be looking at the recriminalization of these possession charges. So anyway, just some comments. It was a little concerning that some of that language is in there. So
A couple of things. These contracts, if, predicated on Measure 10 as it exists today, I think there are going to have to be some amendments, I would imagine, based on any changes, any material changes to Measure 110 and the funding. But if you look at what the intention of the funding was for, and then you look at all of those, ancillary ones, we're talking about expungement and things like that, which, a lot of that stuff we don't agree with. But here it comes down to the one question is, what do we do with contracts from OHA that we don't agree with? And nevertheless, we have to sign them. Or, it's like we have a gun to our head. So I don't know the answer. I don't think we've ever been able to answer it.
okay. Well, we'll see what happens in the short session.
Well, I don't think there's any appetite on the part of our legislators to go as far as we want to go, because I think there are just too many people who are benefiting financially from this. We haven't seen the expected or some of the promised results, but I think there are a lot of people who are making sure that, some grant funding is going to, nonprofits, and we're not necessarily seeing it trickle down to our community. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay. Did you move approval, Commissioner Starrett, earlier?
I believe I did.
Yes.
Okay. And Commissioner Johnston didn't state anything that he would like to weigh in on this prior to this meeting? Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay. Well, there is a motion to approve. If there's no further discussion or questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, let the record show Commissioner Starrett and Bershauer voted in the affirmative and Commissioner Johnston is absent. We're on I, yeah. I2, consideration of approval of amendment number 2 to an agreement between Yamhill County Planning Department and Parametrics, Inc. Board Order 18-124, extending services for post-closure monitoring of the closed Newburgh landfill retroactive to January 1st, 2024 through December 31st of 2026. And increasing consultation fees by $92,365 over the 3-year contract for a total not to exceed amount of $244,974. So this is our, I don't have any notes on that one. These are there's two, correct? Yeah, 2 of our post-closure monitoring contracts. And Ashley's here just in case there's questions. Any questions on either of these?
No, thank you.
Okay. I think we're good. Thank you. Okay, I will move approval of item I2. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, Commissioner Starrett and Bershauer voted in the affirmative. Commissioner Johnston is absent today. Item I3, consideration of approval of amendment number 3 to an agreement between Yamhill County Planning Department and Parametrics, Inc. Board Order 18-123, extending services for post-closure monitoring of the closed Whiteson landfill retroactive to January 1st of 2024 through December 31st of 2026, and increasing consultation fees by $99,930 over the 3-year contract for a total not to exceed amount of $231,506. I will move approval. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, Commissioner Sterrett and Burschauer voted in the affirmative. Commissioner Johnston is absent. Item I4. Consideration of approval of an independent contractor agreement between Yamhill County by and through the Yamhill County District Attorney's Office Multidisciplinary Child Abuse Team and Juliet's House, an Oregon nonprofit public benefit corporation for independent abuse assessments, medical evaluations, and related services in the not to exceed amount of $245,000, retroactive to July 1st of 2023 through June 30th of 2025, and subject to final review and approval of County Council's office. And Juliet's House is one of our amazing partners in our efforts to protect children who are victims of abuse and neglect or at high risk of abuse and neglect. And we're certainly grateful for the work that they do in our community.
And we're also hoping there's a legislative concept or at least a policy option out there that would beef up our response to internet child abuse investigations. We have 5 investigators in Oregon. There are 25 in Washington, or 25 in Idaho and 21 in Washington. So we're far behind, and there are lots of kids out there who are still being victimized. So this would be a great adjunct to what Juliet's House does.
Right, and they were saying that the presence of AI now is making it much easier to find these perpetrators. But we just don't have the staff to then follow through and make sure that children are protected, so. Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Records show Commissioner Sterrett and Burschauer voted in the affirmative, and Commissioner Johnston is absent. Item J is public hearings. There's nothing today, and that brings us to announcements.
Chair, I reached out to Oregon Housing and Community Services Director Andrea Bell in regards to the millions of dollars that the Secretary of State's office has determined has not been either accounted for or addressed in their Oregon Emergency Rental Assistance Program. It was a fairly well vetted study, and the response I got back from the interim assistant and the letter that came from Director Bell, in essence, said there's $426 million in federal pandemic funds, which basically we can't keep track of and we don't know what happened to, but it's not our fault and there's nothing to see here because COVID. So that's what we got. And all I can say is every time we talk about taking large sums of money, either now there's even proposals to give more money to OHCS. And early on in our discussions for housing at the Yamhill County level, Director Bell was asked, how are we going to use some of these funds at the local level? And the answers were frankly, pretty much vague. So I don't have a whole lot of confidence in these large amounts of money that get allocated to state agencies. And we're seeing in Oregon, it's almost as if every time you hand one of these agencies lots of money, there's no accountability and guarantee you nothing's going to happen. And we've got a lot of people out there who could use some of this funding. So I just wanted to call out that letter, which is 4 pages of nothing to see here. Move along. And we spent all Monday talking about some of the housing issues, the addiction issues, public safety, land use at AOC.
Long couple days. On Tuesday night, I attended the McMinnville City Council meeting, and the issue of safe zones around schools, meaning no camping, no public drug use, none of that, has been sort of this back and forth for several months, because children in McMinnville are trying to walk to school and they're having to walk through these encampments and they're walking over needles, et cetera, et cetera. And so Superintendent Brockett did provide public comment and advocated for safe zones around the schools, and is really pushing the city council to adopt something, whether it's an overlay or something. But we need to address especially specific schools. And it was the first time that I'd seen kind of a breakthrough in some of the counselors. A couple of them made comments that when they originally passed this sort of zoning restriction on camping, it included residential zones. And the assumption was that that then encompassed all of the schools. Well, some of the schools are in commercial zones or whatever. So it didn't actually work for all of the schools. So hopefully they kind of take that back, and they're, the mayor alluded to the fact that they are trying to look at doing an overlay zone that would protect the schools. So that was good news. Definitely a different tone that night in terms of the response, but the community showed up to testify, quite a few of them, including a 13-year-old young man who was talking about the presence of this activity on sports fields and how they don't feel safe. So hopefully they move forward with that. And then I attended actually Commissioner Johnston and I both attended the Soil and Water Conservation District meeting on Wednesday morning. And attended really to support some of the residents around the BLM land, High Heaven Road Gate area, because they're concerned about the Panther Creek Bike Trail, and they haven't quite gotten specific answers to their questions about how the Cycle Yamhill County Group will prevent erosion or protect the hillside or protect stream quality, water quality. And so hopefully there's going to be a partnership with Soil and Water where they can help instruct on how those things are done. But I think because it's BLM land, BLM has sort of a different set of requirements. And former Commissioner Kula was there, and he said that BLM is really the entity that will hold Cycle Yamhill County accountable for any activity that goes on. But as part of that meeting, we were given a letter from our County Parks Board Chair, Jim Colbert, that was very pointed to the Soil and Water Conservation District Director. And I'm not going to read it, but it basically addresses the fact that at one of the Soil and Water Conservation District Board retreats, the message was that, quote, Yamhill County is the most park-poor county in Oregon. Local commissioners continue to block public park projects and are discussing selling off current park land, unquote. So there's, again, this erroneous and just constant stream of misinformation about that, probably coming from areas like places like the News Register, whatever. It's misinformation, and our park board chair took it upon himself to really push back and say, Yamhill County is one of the healthiest counties when it comes to the number of parks that we have that are actually open to the public and accessible. And Commissioner Johnston made sure that the Soil and Water Board was aware that they are pushing misinformation, and that is not something that we accept. And at the end of what he said, he suggested that the board, Soil and Water Board, meet with the Parks Board. And he felt that that is a good step forward in terms of understanding each group's goals. So I support him in that. Hopefully that meeting can happen soon. Other than that, I don't have any other announcements other than drive safe through the impending snowmageddon over the weekend.
Or don't drive at all.
Or don't drive it, don't leave your house. Any other announcements or anything for the good of the order?
None.
Okay, I will adjourn the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for January 11th, 2024. It is